So an outline is, first of all, a map to make sure you arrive at the proper destination. What we're looking for is a clear roadmap, first for you and for them. And so with that, it's first for my own head in presenting it, but it's also going to become sticky, right, for them to be able to hold on to, whoever your audience is. And so it's really not about memory, it's about organization. Organize your thoughts. If you can't remember it, they're not going to remember it.
Hi, welcome to the Expositors Collective Podcast, episode 331. I'm your host, Mike Neglia. The voice that you heard is our guest for this week. This is Pastor Brian Bell from Calvary Murrieta in California. And this is a recording that we did at one of our training events in nearby Temecula, California, at Reliance Church. Brian gave a very short, very punchy, very easy to listen to talk about communicating well. He speaks a lot about the importance of crafting an outline that makes sense, but he also just smuggles in a lot of wisdom about homiletics and good communication and teaching the Bible in a way that sticks in people's hearts and minds. I know that you are going to benefit from this short, punchy, compact wisdom that is going to help you in your personal study and public proclamation of God's Word.
Hi, Pastor Brian Broderson here, and I would like to invite those of you who are pastors, ministry leaders, anyone serving in the church to join us for this year's CGN International Conference. Our theme this year is Hope, Suffering, and Glory. And we're going to be studying through the first epistle of Peter. It's going to be a fantastic time. We've got 9 speakers who are going to be our main session speakers. We've got a number of fantastic workshops, caring for your own soul. It's going to be a fantastic time. The dates are June 23rd to the 26th, and that's going to be held at Calvary Chapel, Costa Mesa. So if you're interested and would like to find out more, you can go to conference.calvarychapel.com. That is conference.calvarychapel.com. God bless.
Doctors practice medicine. You and I, we get to practice homiletics or preaching or teaching, whatever you want to call it. I communicate to our staff a lot. We're perpetual learners. We have to remind ourselves of that. There isn't one of us that have arrived, right? And so we're going to constantly be learning. I love everything that we're doing. I've been learning from the guys in my group, and it's just absolutely beautiful to be able to learn together. When I grew up, I went in elementary school. I was a Catholic until age 19. And so when I was a little guy, we had to wear uniforms. And in these uniforms, we had to wear these geeky sweaters. They were button-up sweaters, dark blue. And every recess, I remember as a little kid going out there, and we'd pick foxtails, those little weed things, kind of looks like wheat. And you would chuck them when somebody isn't looking, chuck them on their back, and it would stick. The reason I say that is because John Phillips said this: outlines are the burrs that lodge themselves in the minds of the listeners. That's a good picture, right? Okay, and so that's where, as we just start off in doing that, for those of you that check the box, just I don't do outlines. Just listen, that's all. There might be something that you're going to be able to glean, grab onto, and be able to say, oh, maybe outlines are kind of important. Why you need an outline? We'll start with that. Why you need an outline. You can share a message that is random thoughts of a bunch of Bible verses, a collection of truths. It might be disconnected thoughts, but they're truths, and that works, and people can do that. My early sermons were that way. I think my early sermons had like 32-point message. It was just like, I was so excited. Everything that I studied, I wanted to share with you everything. And so I learned this from this commentary, and I'd quote this guy and that guy, and it was just a whole bunch of just random points that were put together in that way. Like a dump truck, I'd back up and just dump information on everyone. But have you heard, no one likes to be dumped on. And so we realize information is giving out, communication is getting through. That's a good one. Information is giving out. I don't know who I stole it from, but it was really good. Information is giving out, communication is getting through. Ultimately, that's what we want to do. And so I think a better way to get through is to build an outline that's thoughtful, it's going somewhere, it's progressive, and ultimately has a conclusion or a destination that we're trying to get to. And so a clear focus, an end goal, that's what we're going for. My wife Kelly and I, we had a van that we were giving away to a friend that lived in Denver, Colorado. I asked one of my pastors, hey, have you ever been to Denver? He says, yeah, I've been there 3 or 4 times. I said, awesome. I told him we were giving him a van. I said, do you mind driving with me and we'll fly back? And so we were talking about it. He says, yeah. And so we basically knew the way there. And so it's, go up the 15 and just cut across the 70 and start shooting in. So I'm halfway through Utah, and my friend Dan was taking his turn. He was driving. I said, are we almost there? He says, I don't know. And I said, what do you mean? You said you've been to Denver a number of different times. He says, oh, I've always flown there. True story. And so we pulled out a map and we're able to go. So an outline is, first of all, a map to make sure you arrive at the proper destination. What we're looking for is a clear roadmap, first for you and for them. And so with that, it's first for my own head in presenting it, but it's also going to become sticky, right, for them to be able to hold on to, whoever your audience is. And so it's really not about memory, it's about organization. Organize your thoughts. If you can't remember it, they're not going to remember it. I'm not talking about whether you write out everything you're going to say or whether you do a few bullet points. We all do that a little bit differently in that way, but it's thought through. We're going point to point to point, ultimately to get to this conclusion that we're going to talk about. I used to be really jealous of somebody who could just stand up and open up their Bible and then just preach extemporaneously, which is just a fun big word to say, right? But with that, I realized until I wasn't, and until it's not about just getting up and being able to. I'm kind of locked to my notes, and I think it's good for me because when I put them together, they're usually pretty linear and it's going somewhere, right? But if I just stand up and talk, I'll be all over the place, and there'll be rabbit trails and all of those different things. Not that everybody that speaks contemporaneously does it that way, but second part. How to build an outline. So my outline has an outline. So our next one, how to build an outline, right? So outlining is a map, but it's also a process. There's, again, a destination in mind. You've already heard it said, the big idea. That's our destination. That's what we want to get to, which we arrive at by mapping out our steps on how to get there. Have you ever told a joke and then forgot the punchline? If there's anything about jokes, you have to keep the punchline in mind. And so if you've either heard someone do that, or I've done it before, and I get halfway through, and it's like, I forgot what the punchline is. And unfortunately, you and I, we've sat in a lot of sermons where they forgot the punchline, or never figured out the punchline. It's just our teaching is like, well, okay, we'll see you next week. Nick Cady said, it's a good quote, the goal is to present a cohesive message that faithfully exposits or exposes or explains the text, which is a beautiful alliteration, but it's not alliteration for alliteration's sake, right? Just because the whole 3 words start with E. What it's saying there, exposits, exposes, and explains, is already explaining to us what this expository method is all about. See, the first thing we're going to do once we have our text is figure out the big idea. What is your sermon in one sentence? Like if you were stopped on the way to church that morning, or you're stopping to get your coffee. Hey, pastor, what are you teaching on this morning? And instead of just saying, oh, Luke chapter 4, instead to be able to have it succinctly into a sentence. And so this is a destination again to get to. That might be, inside of it is a doctrine or an argument or a thesis or a proposition. But this is after you study the text and you figure out this is what it's about. And then build a case or develop this idea through your main points on how to get there. So identify some main points from your text. If you're taking, let's say, a chapter, and you can kind of break it out that way. Or from other texts in the Bible, if you're teaching from one little verse and you're going to be running to other verses to be able to kind of back up your thoughts on that. But our goal, again, is to take our listeners on a journey. By building this progression, point 1 leads to point 2, leads to point 3, however many points that you have in that, which leads to a definite conclusion. Again, the big idea. Help the listeners see what the text is saying, why it's important to them personally, how it applies to their lives, and how to respond to it appropriately, as we were talking about that third step of application. So outlining doesn't only give you a roadmap, but it also gives you a process. And so our third one is, what's my process? 5-step process here. Number one, we already talked about, big idea, just to go over it. One sentence. I had said, again, a little bit earlier, what is your sermon in one sentence? Again, the destination. Is it doctrine? Is it an argument? Is it a proposition? And then again, the second part of that would be the main points. 2, maybe 4. It's not hard, fast. I read about Richard Baxter. He was a theologian back in the 1600s, and he says, once he said this, and 65thly, I don't feel so bad about my 32 point one, right? And 65thly, so, okay, that's probably too much, right? Okay, so usually, the Baptists always said, 3 points in a poem, something close to that, right, in there. And then illustrate each of your main points. Somebody said illustrations are not necessary, but they're very helpful. It's usually what people remember on a Sunday morning if I'm going and talking to them. Oh, I love this. And it's usually one of the illustration points because, again, it's sticky. And so I think a way to do it is you make your point and then illustrate your point, then make your point again, and then illustrate it again. That might be a formal process, but again, it's something that you can just jot down in an outline as you're studying and make sure you fill all those in. Now, every time will you have 2? Maybe not, but it's a good basic structure to go with. Also, make your main points, bring it into the present tense for your listeners. For instance, in Exodus chapter 18 is where Jethro gives his son-in-law, Moses, some good advice. And so you could call it what Jethro taught. That could be a main point, right? But instead of let's bring it from 3,000 years ago and bring it in today, how about leadership tools for today or something like that? Anything to take it from old Bible times up into the present time is oftentimes helpful on our main points. Spring from the Bible world to the present world. Also remember, it's not about being clever and sensational, but clear and appealing. That's what we're going for, clear and appealing. Alliterations, again, if your 3 points all start with the letter P. Alliterations are helpful, but just don't get cheesy with them, right? Don't make them forced. They're useful aid to the listener's memory. It's usually easy to remember what we said earlier. Exposits, exposes, explains, that they're all speaking to something. They're all teaching us, okay, that's what we need to be about as we're looking at our text. They act as barbs on a fishing hook. They cause the hook to stick well. If you fly fish, you make sure that you fish barbless. Matter of fact, you have to fish barbless because you're going to catch and release. The barb is so once the hook gets in the jaw, it doesn't come back out because there's a barb going the other way, and it sticks, and that's where we want these to be able to stick. I never forgot an outline that I heard on Judges 16:21. It's the end of Samson's life, and it says this. I'll just give the quote of the verse 21. And the Philistines seized him and gouged out his eyes and brought him down to Gaza and bound him with bronze shackles, and he ground at the mill in the prison. And what their 3 points were: blinding, binding, and grinding. What sin will do to you, but it's one. I heard it years ago, but it was just like, I wrote it in my Bible. It was just like, okay, that works, right? In having an introduction, what's worked the best for me when it comes to preaching? Think of a ladder. I used to be an electrician. I'm an electrician turned pastor. And so I have this wooden ladder in my garage. And so picture with my wooden ladder here, I was going to bring it and set it up, and I got lazy. But you can picture 5 steps, okay? So you have your introduction, point 1, point 2, point 3, and your conclusion, okay? And so that's our ladder. Is that only 5? Yeah, that's 5 steps. And so with that's our ladder this way. But you also, if you have these 2 rails on the side to hold them together, what might those be that should be holding our intro, point 1, 2, and 3 together, and also our conclusion? What 2 things should be holding them together? I think the big idea and Christ-centered, right? Those could be the rails that way. And if you want to take the analogy further, I've heard you can lean it up against a fruit tree, and then you're actually walking up this ladder, and you're bringing your audience with you to go get the fruit of whatever is in the text. I guess we can go farther with that, is be careful like with timing and all of that, because have you ever heard an introduction that goes for about 20 minutes? And all of a sudden they said, well, let's get to the text now. And you're going, oh my gosh, if that was just the intro, that's the first step of the ladder being about that high, right? And so again, think about how ladders are laid out. There's exact amount of inches, same with their steps going up. There's OSHA approved, right? 7.5 or 8 inches, whatever it is. Everyone is the same, right? And so it's good to think of it that way also. It's like, whoa, I'm getting way too much. Or after my third point, so I'll just wrap up what I just said with those 3 points and have no conclusion at all, which sometimes I do. That's the one I mess up on the most, which is the most important one we're saying. It's the big idea. That's where we're getting to. That means I've been lost in my study. I'm excited about the text and just sharing, here's some truths, and forgetting about where we're going. In the intro, you're laying foundation for why they want to listen to this. Build a bridge from, again, Bible times to today. Why does this matter to them? Why should they care? I think Nick had already talked about tension. You can set up tension, what the text is going to resolve. Don't resolve it right away, but here's the tension. This is a problem. How can the Bible say this and say that? And then just leave them with it and then answer it by the end. Please answer it. Don't make them leave without here, but you want to get there, but leave that tension that's there. But draw them in. Just, I think it was last Sunday or the Sunday before. Last Sunday, I'm going through 1 Thessalonians, and I was starting chapter 4. And I started one of the services with, hey, this morning, if you're a heterosexual, a homosexual, an L, a G, B, T, or Q, this is for you today. Well, that makes everybody's all of a sudden, whoa, they're listening for what it is. And I said, listen to one of the verses. It's the main verse in this first half of 1 Thessalonians 4. This is the will of God. Like, you don't have to guess, like, I wonder what the will of God is for my life. Here's one of them. It's pretty clear. The will of God is your sanctification. And then he narrows it down even further, specifically saying that it has to do with sexual immorality. And so what I asked all of us to do in the room was to say, don't be thinking of them or that group or those other people, but all of us where we get challenged in that. And so it's right from the very beginning of an intro of kind of bringing them in. Why should I listen to this? With the conclusion against the big idea of the text. This is where we land the plane. We've probably, a lot of us have been on, different plane flights where all of a sudden they can't land and they have to circle. We did that in Haiti, over Haiti once, so we were going and going and going, and it seemed like such a long time, and it was just on a bank of about a 45. We're just going. Well, we were running out of gas, so we had to go over to the Dominican side of the island, get gas, and then come back, and then we could land. Again, we've all heard messages that way also. No, this is the time to land the plane, right? We're not going to spend a whole lot of time on this. And don't miss the key. Jesus is the answer to all of life's riddles and problems and questions. That's why we're making it Christ-centric all the way through it, but not to focus on a list for people to do in their own strengths, but to send them away with an understanding, an assurance, and a confidence of what Jesus has done for them. I've enjoyed what I've heard about. It's not about moralism. I call it Christian Buddhism. Buddhism, they don't have a God. We think of the different Buddhas that are there. They've individuals, humans that have reached enlightenment, supposedly. But with that, it's not looking after a God. It's an eightfold path of Buddha. It's about morals. It's about ethics. That's what they're about. And so that's not our goal, to be Christian Buddhists, right? It's not about just being good boys and good girls. And that's what a lot of us have learned kind of in church growing up, maybe. But no, it's about Jesus. I'll end with this. Here's my example. So our last point. Here's my example. In 1 Thessalonians 2, as I said, I was kind of going through that and looking at that. In reading through the chapter there, I saw the word gospel come up 4 times, verse 2, 4, 8, and 9. Wow. So that caught my attention as being about the gospel. And so this time I didn't do an order. Normally I'm taking this section and this section and then this section of my chapter, or half chapter is usually what I do on a Sunday morning. But I just took the time and I read through all the verses, 12 verses, and went through it that way. I titled my message was Gospel Action, emphasis on the action part. There's something that we're going to do with whatever this gospel is. It's easy for us to be able to check 1 Corinthians 15 box. It's death, burial, and resurrection of Christ. I think it's more than that. I think it's deeper than that. I think there's some action involved in that, but we'll set that over here. My big idea is when sharing the gospel, check your motive, method, and message. Those are my 3 main points. I actually had 2 other ones, but those were the 3. Big idea was kind of, how do I See, a lot of times they say if you're building a big idea, what you can do, and I think this was in Haddon Robinson's book that somebody mentioned earlier, is make it into a question and then 3 answers. So what is the question? And the 3 answers would be your points. Back it up. Like, how do I share the gospel? I share the gospel by checking my motives, by remembering my method, and by knowing my message. And that's really was the heart of what I wanted to get into, because if all of us had a little 3x5 cards, I don't know if they still make those or not, and I passed them all out, and you had to write down in a sentence or two, what is the gospel? Would we be able to do it? What is that? And so I really spent a lot of time in doing that. And so that was my outline. Gospel motives, gospel message, gospel oppositions, and gospel outcomes is just a little short thing at the very end of what that was. So I picked gospel motives because Paul says we were gentle among you, like a new nursing mother, like a father with children. And there was this beautiful heart of, before we just go share the gospel, tell somebody how to get saved, the motives behind it, at least from Paul, was just so beautiful and endearing and loving in that way. The gospel methods was positive and negative. We had boldness, but then we didn't have these things. It wasn't for flattery or greed, and he goes on with this list. We weren't trying to seek glory or put any demands on us. And then the gospel message. And that was my opportunity to point into the gospel is what has been done for us by God in Jesus. I have on my notes on my phone, I love grabbing I just collect. I collect gospel sentences of how people have done that. And I love that one. The gospel is what has been done for us. So it's not something I'm doing, right? The gospel, the good news, I couldn't do it. I tried to do it for 19 years of my life. I failed pretty miserably. We can't do it. The gospel is what has been done for us by God in Jesus. And I won't worry about those 2 things. Lastly, I'll just say this. Trim the fat off your message. It's more of what you don't say rather than what you do say. And once I am finished, I still go through my notes 3 times. 2 times that evening before, and 1 time when I get there in the morning, I'm fresh and I go through it. What can I take out? What has been repeated? What doesn't need to be there? Trim the fat. That's all I got. God bless you. Have a wonderful rest of your evening and fun learning along with you guys. Thank you.
Okay, thanks for listening all the way to the end. There was a lot of great stuff packed into such a short time frame. And so I'm thankful to Brian for communicating so well, and thanks to you for listening all the way to the end. Maybe you're thinking, I'd like to have more Expositors Collective in my life. Well, here's some of the ways that you can connect with us and our ministry. We have online presence. We've got a good website, expositors.co. We also are on nearly every social media platform, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, with quotes about preaching that are about every single day. There's a new thought or 2 that will just keep the importance of communicating God's word well at the forefront of your mind. So give us a follow on whatever social media platform you use. And then also for those that are on Facebook, we do have a pretty vibrant and exciting online Facebook community. There's 630 something preachers and Bible teachers there. And it's a wonderful place as people ask for advice on how to edit their sermons to make them shorter and punchier, where people can ask for recommendations on commentaries, when people can tease out ideas that they're thinking through about coaching younger and newer Bible teachers. It's a really great, super encouraging corner of the internet. And so there's a link in the show notes that will bring you to our Facebook community. Otherwise, just search for Expositors Collective on Facebook. There's our public page that's visible there, but then also you should see our private group. And so if you request to join that, there's some questions you have to fill out, and then I will grant you access to that page. If you're listening so far, I might as well also tell you that Expositors Collective is coming to Africa. In September, myself, Ed Compion, Brian Kelly, and some others, we're going to Kampala, Uganda, and we're putting on a 3-day version of our training event that is going to enrich encourage the Ugandan pastors and ministry leaders that are there. There's going to be some opportunities for fundraising as we are putting that on as a free event. And so it'd be wonderful if the international, worldwide community of Expositors Collective podcast listeners, if you could help fund this gift to our brothers and sisters in Uganda. Stay tuned for more details, but I'm just so glad that we get to take this to a new continent and that the congregations and preachers of Uganda are going to be blessed by what we're able to offer. Well, thanks for listening. I hope that this episode and all that we do at Expositors Collective help you to grow in your personal study and public proclamation of God's Word.
This podcast is a part of CGN Media, a podcast network that points to Christ. We are supported by listeners like you. To help us create more great shows, visit cgnmedia.org/support.